What's up guys, Brandon here from Gearist. Today we're going to be taking an in-depth look at the launch number 3 from Brooks. It seems lately that I've been getting myself into a lot of shoes where they're on the second or third or more iteration of that particular model, but I have yet to run in any of them, and such is the day with today's shoe, the Brooks launch number 3. This is the first launch model of the much lauded launch series that I have yet to run in, so I was very excited to get my feet in it and see what it's all about. So let's break it down. First with the outsole. For those of you that ran in the Brooks launch 2, not really anything has changed, but for those of you who have not run in the Brooks Launch 2, let's check this out. First, the layout of the outsole is a full contact variety, and as you can see here, there's actually almost a tire-like tread, if you can look at the tread of the rubber there, that lays over almost the full entirety of the bottom of this shoe. This is kind of in contrast to a lot of shoes we've seen lately where the companies are trying to put only rubber in strategic areas where those are high impact areas. This is an effort to shave weight and basically not put rubber where it doesn't need to be. It cuts on cost, cuts on waste, cuts on weight, like I mentioned a second ago. But in this case, this shoe is gone for the opposite. It put rubber everywhere. And at 10.8 ounces in my men's size 11, this could actually use some weight loss, and maybe that's one of the spots where they should look. On the one hand, this means that the Brooks Launch 3 is really durable, but on the other, it actually also means that there is a little bit of weight that could be saved. Now, one of the things that if you look on close inspection is that this black area right up here in the forefoot, right under the metatarsal heads, is actually thicker in rubber than anywhere else on the shoe. So while the durability is excellent across the board, we've seen no accelerated wear or anything like that. For those of you that may be dedicated heel strikers or something like that, or just drag that heel for whatever reason, you might find a little bit of uneven wear. In other words, you're going to find some more accelerated wear in the heel as opposed to the forefoot. It's not that there's no rubber there, it's that there's just more rubber here than there is back here. And while the outsole of this is relatively flat, there are no real super sharper lugs or anything like that to speak of. I did find quite a bit of good traction on this, whether it was on dry or wet pavement, and also on snow. Now I should note this was not on ice. While I was admittedly more aware of what my feet were doing, where they were going and the like, this did well on snow. You know, I made sure to land very much under the center of mass, right under my body, not toeing off or anything like that. But again, for its main purposes on wet and dry pavement, this does very well in the traction department. As far as durability goes, in my roughly 40 miles that I've got on the shoe, I think I have a little bit over 40 miles on the shoe, I see no accelerated wear at all anywhere on the shoe. However, as I mentioned earlier, if you are a dedicated heel dragger, striker, you're really hammering on that heel, you may see a little bit of accelerated wear in that area, but maybe that's a good opportunity to clean up your gait. Moving into the midsole of the shoe, from what I can tell from version 2 to version 3, there's no significant update or change to this midsole, but for the uninitiated in the crowd, let's break down what that means. The midsole of the shoe uses Brooks' proprietary BioMogo DNA midsole material. That's a mouthful. This foam is meant to adapt to your size and speed and the variable impact amounts that come with that. So it's basically an active foam technology that adapts to whatever sort of forces are being put upon it. Apart from the foam itself, the Launch 3 has a segmented crash pad back here. You can see this little separated off pad. Now this is an area that is actually meant for higher impact, again, for those of you that are crashing in on that heel. But again, maybe it's a good opportunity to work on gait a little bit. It's also meant to smooth out that initial impact and really ease into a very quick and efficient transition from this area or from the midfoot into the forefoot of the shoe. To be honest, I really didn't know what to expect in terms of cushioning from this shoe, as many different proprietary foams have different actions. They really react differently depending on the manufacturer and depending on what they're aiming to do. I actually really enjoyed the feel of this foam. It's an interesting balance between cushion and response. It wasn't overly cushy, but it's also not super firm, and it really puts itself in that sweet spot of being a really solid everyday training shoe. And with that said, in terms of ground feel, I do feel like this shoe could benefit from a little bit of the adjusting of its geometry. The stack heights in this shoe are 27 millimeters in the heel and 17 millimeters in the forefoot for a net drop of 10 millimeters, which in today's market is a little bit on the high side of where the industry sits, in my opinion. I would love to see the shoe drop about 5 millimeters of stack off the forefoot and about 10 millimeters of stack off the heel. Not only would this allow the foam, that DNA foam in there, to be a little bit more flexible, but it would also get that drop down to about 5 millimeters, which is right around that sweet spot for me. And let's be honest, it would increase the ground feel of the shoe and probably really aid in the responsiveness. The upper of the Launch 3 is an apparent complete redesign of this part of the shoe. The mesh is a dual layer setup, which actually flips the script on what most shoes do. Whereas most shoes will put a more open layer on top and then a finer mesh backing on the interior of the shoe, Brooks has done the opposite, and they put what you can see there may 3DB, those larger kind of dots which you can see there, and then there's a finer mesh that overlays that. What that means is that inside there's that larger, more breathable and open mesh, and on the outside this area is going to keep that debris out. And I found the Brooks Launch 3 to be very breathable all the way back to the heel counter. I mean, even back into this area, it goes through that mesh and through a little bit of the foam here really well. So it's a really nicely breathable shoe, something to consider if you're running in cold weather and you have sensitive to cold tootsies. Some of the credit of the breathability of the shoe must be attributed to their use of 3D printed overlays instead of bonded overlays. The bonded overlays tend to be a little more dense, have to be more of them, where the 3D printed overlays can be exactly where they need to be and can really make a shoe very open in its structural appearance and its structural function. Starting at the back of the shoe, the support overlays, which you can see right there, actually almost start as a web. It kind of looks like a Spider-Man shoe, and then goes down into this area almost like an entire rand all the way around the shoe, which then right around the forefoot on both the ball, the first and fifth metatarsal side, goes up into the lacing area here, this bottom lace. So when you're cinching down, it actually makes a very cohesive feel on the shoe, which we'll talk a little bit more about in the fit section. The only real stitches on the upper of this shoe are right here in the throat area, just kind of reinforcing the laces, and then a little bit here on either side of this synthetic toe cap, one there and one there. Just a little stitch. You do not feel them at all on the inside. Something I'll touch on a little bit more in the fit section in a second is this toe cap. Now, I feel like it does a good job, especially if you're bumping into things, you tend to be a little bit clumsy. However, while it's nice and it adds a good deal of structure to the shoe, it actually is a little more narrow in the kind of point of the toe box than what I'd like to see. The tongue of the Launch 3 is nicely padded right there, not too much foam. It's a little thicker than it probably needs to be, but the foam is very light, so it counters itself nicely. The loop, that stay in place loop that we're used to seeing right here, actually appears on the lateral side of the tongue. It's kind of interesting. It's just a tiny loop. You might not even be able to see it right there, which keeps any of that tongue slip from happening. Kind of a unique place, stays out of the way, makes a really clean line in this guy. Around the collar, the foam is perfect for me. I like the way it feels. It's very comfortable in the foot, even with super low socks. Really nice. That heel counter actually up here is pretty flexible, kind of toward the top, but then as you get down toward the midsole, it becomes really quite rigid, and there's a little bit of this midsole material that comes up and over, kind of transitions into the upper there. Makes for a very well-shaped heel cup, and if you're doing any kind of agility needing moves while you're running, going around a corner or something like that, you feel nice and locked down into the shoe, which makes it ideal for something like a 5K race. The fit of the Brooks Launch 3 is almost spot on for me. The heel fits very well, with the bottom of the heel counter, as I mentioned a second ago, being firm enough to really hold that foot in place with a nicely shaped heel cup, but also having enough flexibility up top to really accommodate a wider heel if necessary, and maybe even trim down into a more narrow heel if that's what you've got going on. The midfoot of this guy right in here fit me very well. I really enjoy the way it feels. It cinches over the foot very comfortably. The mesh feels good against my foot. Sock, I don't really go without socks, but one of the things that I would say is if you've got a wider foot, there's a little bit of room to go with that, but if you've got a more narrow foot, you're going to have to cinch down pretty far, and I'm not sure if you could get it much past that. I mean, you can't really have the two sides of this overlapping or it just doesn't function, but you know, most feet are going to be very comfortable in this. Now moving into the forefoot, there are actually a few things going on if we kind of break it down into two sections. First, this section right here, there's actually a reasonable amount of room as you go across the metatarsals. Now, of course, this depends on how much you are tightening it down, because as you tighten it down, you're going to pull in on this bottom lace and it's going to pull across the metatarsal heads there and cinch you in. But in general, it's actually pretty comfortable in that area. Not a ton of room, but it's actually not also pinched off. Then if we move into the actual toe box up here, I just feel like it's too pointed. I would really love to see a little more room on both sides, both the lateral and the medial side of this, to give a little more room for toe splay, because while my foot isn't pinched in there, there's no real room for toe splay. There's a tiny bit of room for vertical wiggle in there, which is nice, but again, I just want to see more overall room for the feet and the toes to function as they would naturally. Again, it doesn't feel pinched, it just feels like there's not a lot of room to spare. And that's one of the interesting things about this, is that you've got 90% of this upper that is dead on with the fit and all that kind of stuff, but then 10% that just isn't. So it's a little puzzling to me, and what kind of foot, what kind of mold, what kind of last was this built off of? And I'd like to see the last of certain things like this be adapted to a more natural foot shape sometimes. The ride of the Launch 3 is really very nice, and I really enjoyed my time in it. It's firm enough to give people like me who are looking for that firm ride and a good amount of ground feel, it's firm enough to give that to you or to us, but then at the same time there's enough cushion, and I think this is partially to, credit to that DNA foam, there's enough cushion for those who are looking for a not too harsh experience. As I mentioned in the midsole section of this review a second ago, this midsole material, that Biomogo DNA foam, is really nice and resilient, and this is the perfect material to be able to shave a little bit off, like I mentioned, in the stack heights of the heel and the forefoot, to bring it closer to the ground, enhance that ground feel, perhaps enhance that responsiveness from this, and the material, again, is such that it would really accommodate that very well, I think. The Launch 3 is the first shoe, believe it or not, from Brooks that I have personally given a full review to, and I'm really happy to have been able to do it. This is a shoe whose distances are going to be very comfortable, 5K, 10K, half marathon, up to a marathon and beyond, depending on your taste. And at the same time, it's also a really great daily runner. Although I will say that if you're going to use this for an entire marathon training cycle, you probably are going to want to get another pair too. There's a very good and very obvious reason why the Launch series is such a popular shoe with so many people. And while the fit is kind of on the fence for me in that toe box area, I really feel like a ton of people are going to enjoy this shoe. Not only because of its function and feel, but also because it's such a quality build. I mean, this is a really, really well put together shoe and well worth its price. Which, speaking of, this shoe right here comes in at $100, which puts it very low amongst its peers. And for such a shoe that's so durable and all that kind of stuff, $100 is really a bargain price. I do hope that the small things that we've talked about in this shoe review today are addressed in the next version of the shoe, because if they are, and even in this version, I mean, if you're a Brooks fan, you're a devotee, how can you not own a shoe like this? At $100, it's a really, really great bargain. Great shoe, super high quality. It's going to take you for all your training and racing miles. Now guys, before we get to the question of the day, I want you to please like and favorite this video, and please, please, please don't forget to subscribe, and hey, give us a share. That would be a huge help as we go through the new year of 2016. Now for our question of the day, what Brooks running shoes have you run in? And what is your favorite? If you've never run any, we want to hear about it. So either way, leave a comment down in the comment section below. If you guys have any questions about this or any of our other reviews, or if you'd like to see a question of yours on our Ask Gearist segment, don't hesitate to shoot an email to info@gearist.com or leave a comment down in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to follow us on all of our social media channels, which you can see right here, including our YouTube channel, which is right there. Please subscribe to this channel. Make sure you get all our updates, which are including some promotions that are coming very soon. We promise within inside the next 30 days, 45 days or so. So keep an eye out for those. Thank you guys so much, and we will see you next time.